Good morning, Central. I have a treat for our Disney princes and princesses in the congregation today. Parents, I'm sorry. You've heard this song more than you would like, but it's happening today. We're going to do some Frozen. The snow glows white on the mountain tonight, not a footprint to be seen. A kingdom of isolation, and it looks like I'm the queen. The wind is howling like the swirling storm inside. Couldn't keep it in, heaven knows I tried. Don't let them in, don't let them see. Be the good girl you always have to be. Conceal, don't feel, don't let them know. Well, now they know. Let it go, let it go. Can't hold it back anymore. Let it go, let it go. Turn away and slam the door. I don't care what they're going to say. Let the storm rage on. The cold never bothered me anyway. It's funny how some distance makes everything seem small, and the fears that once controlled me can't get to me at all. It's time to see what I can do to test the limits and break through. No right, no wrong, no rules for me. I'm free. Let it go. Let it go. I am one with the wind and sky. Let it go. Let it go. You'll never see me cry. Here I'll stand, and here I'll stay. Let the storm rage on. My power flurries through the air into the ground. My soul is spiraling in frozen fractals all around, and one thought crystallizes like an icy blast. I'm never going back. The past is in the past. Let it go. Let it go. And I'll rise like the break of dawn. Let it go. Let it go. The perfect girl is gone. Here I'll stand in the light of day. Let the storm rage on. The cold never bothered me anyway.
Good morning, Central. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Julia, and I'm one of the pastors around here, and I'm really excited that I get to be with you all this morning. And I just want to say, well, I have a lot of things to say, but first, I want to say welcome, and we're really glad that you're here, and just excited to be together with y'all this morning. Before I launch into announcements, just want to say, go ahead and hit that love button, hit the like button, share the service if you feel excited about that. You never know who might be scrolling through your Facebook feed this morning and end up finding Central, and they've really been needing a community like ours. And also keep the comments coming. We love seeing them. It helps us to feel more connected to y'all and like we're getting feedback and like we're not just putting these things out into the universe and never knowing how y'all are feeling. So keep the comments and the likes and the shares coming. We've got some announcements this morning. First, I know a lot of you joined us last Monday for the conversation with Cleve and with Dr. Michael Raymer Goodman to talk about COVID and what the church's role is right now, and what that looks like. And that was an awesome conversation. So awesome that we are going to do a second one. So tomorrow, this coming Monday at 7:30 p.m., we'll be doing a similar conversation, but this time focused on what the church will look like post-pandemic, the ways that the church has changed because of the pandemic. We'll be talking with me and Michael and Cleve and also our district superintendent, the Reverend Dr. Vincent Harris, and also the Reverend Dr. Matt Russell, who is a pastor up in Houston. So really hope y'all will join us, and we think it's going to be another great conversation. So that's tomorrow evening, either on Facebook or on YouTube. The next announcement is that you probably already know, but this week is Thanksgiving, so the church and our offices and our Tuesday, Thursday services will be closed on Thursday, but we'll be open on Tuesday and we'll be back to normal by Sunday. So just so you're aware of that, if you're planning on coming by, dropping stuff off or anything like that, we will not be open on Thursday so that we can all safely and socially distantly celebrate Thanksgiving in whatever ways we are doing that this year. One last announcement is that we are still needing volunteers for our next upcoming food distribution. So that'll be the first Monday in December, and we'll ask our volunteers to get there about 4, and we'll be done probably a little bit after 7 once we get everything kind of broken down and cleaned up. And we had a lot of fun last time. It was a great excuse to see people, of course, with our masks on and being safe. But you get to really see and interact with families, and it's just a lot of fun. And we served a lot of families. And this past Monday, Moody was in charge, and they served over 300 families. So we're really, really hoping to get even more volunteers than we had last time. So if you're interested, please let me know. You can email me, julia@galvestoncentralchurch.com, and it'll be a really fun time. And that's coming up not Monday as in tomorrow, but the next Monday, the Monday after Thanksgiving. So hopefully we'll see you then. I think that is all by way of announcements. Just a reminder that we've got small groups going. We have some good things in the works for a Christmas drive and Christmas donations. So stay tuned about those. We'll be posting about them and announcing them once some of the details are more finalized. And so that'll be another way to get involved this holiday season. Before I turn it back over to Ezra for some more music, we like to start every service the same way because we think it's important that we get this right. So hear me say today, whether you're over-churched or under-churched, whether you're used to high church or low church or no church, whether you consider yourself a proud evangelical, a recovering evangelical, or not evangelical at all, whether you're really seeking community this morning, or whether you're feeling pretty burnt out by Zoom and Facebook Live and all of these online ways of gathering, whether you graduated from the State Penn or from Penn State, whether you are feeling hopeful this morning, whether you consider yourself a proud believer or just a hopeful skeptic, we're really glad that you're here and you're welcome here, and we're excited to have you, and you're loved here, you're accepted here. So wherever you're at this morning, we're really glad that you're joining us in worship today. So let's worship Central.
All right, Central, let's worship together. Waiting in the quiet place, longing for embrace, Lord, I look to you. You're faithful to reveal your heart. From the very start, I was meant for you. I am waiting in the quiet place, longing for embrace, Lord, I look to you. You're faithful to reveal your heart. From the very start, I was meant for you. You opened up the heavens, you rained down your love. Father, my heart is toward you. You're more than enough. I am resting in your love for me. Open up, receive, Lord, I look to you. And your water, it washes over me. For eternity, I just want to sing. You opened up the heavens, and you rained down your love. Oh, Father, my heart is toward you. You're more than enough. You're more than enough. You're more than enough. You are my inheritance. You hold my world inside your hands. You are my inheritance. You hold my world inside your hands. You opened up the heavens. You rained down your love. Oh, Father, my heart is toward you. You're more than enough. You're more than enough. You opened up a heaven. like horses driven by keys. You cover the mountains and the valleys below with the breath of your mighty wings. All treasures of wisdom and things to be known are hidden inside of your hands. In this fortunate turn of events, you've asked me to be your friend. You asked me to be your friend. And you are my first, you are my last, you are my future and my past. You are my first, you are my last, you are my future and my past. The constellations are swimming inside the breath of your desire. Where can I run? Where can I hide from your heart's jealous fire? All treasures of wisdom and things to be known are hidden inside of your hands. In this fortunate turn of events, you asked me to be your friend. You asked me to be your friend. And you are my first, you are my last, you are my future and my past. You are my first, you are my last, you are my future and my past. You are the beginning and the end. 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 You are my first, you are my last, you are my future and my past. You are my first, you are my last, you are my future and my God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above, ye heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen.
Hey Central, I'm back again to lead us in our time of offering. As many of you know, we like to say around here that an offering isn't something that can be taken from you. That's called a tax. An offering is something that has to be freely and joyfully and generously given. So please hear and know today that you don't have to give money to be accepted here or to be a part of the community here. We love you, and you're one of us, no matter if you give money or not. But money is important. And so that all being said, if you are able to give, and you're excited about the work that we're doing, some of the things we mentioned in the announcements, COVID talks and diaper distributions and food distributions and Christmas drives and all of that good stuff, we wouldn't be able to do it without your generous giving. And so if you're able and if you feel so led by the work that this community is doing, that y'all are doing, then we would encourage you, and we would encourage you to give, and we would welcome your gifts. Yes, there are 2 different ways to give. You can go online to galvestoncentralchurch.com and you can give that way. You can even set up a recurring donation so that you don't have to think about it all the time. And you can also put some money in an envelope, write a check, and mail it up to the church, or come by the church and put it through the mail slot, and we'll take it that way too. So a screen will pop up as soon as I'm done that will have a little bit more direction, so you can look at those instructions there, and then Michael will be up for this week's sermon. So thanks so much, Central. We really appreciate your generosity.
Hey friends, thanks for being here this morning. My name is Michael, and I have the joy of getting to be one of Central's co-pastors. Last week, Julia kicked off a conversation for us about lessons learned during the pandemic. She approached her brilliant lesson from a social ethical justice sort of lens, and today I want to think through some of the theological, churchy sort of lessons that we're learning right now. So this is Lessons from a Pandemic, Part 2. I want to invite you to turn to the book of Ezekiel. Now, warning, today's sermon is going to be like a treasure hunt. There are going to be moments where you think to yourself, where the hell is he going? Which I guess is no different than most weeks around here. Just trust me on this. Sit tight. It'll all be okay. So, Ezekiel 1, verse 1. Are you ready to go? All right, I'm telling you, the next few minutes, ridiculous, like unbelievably fun. Okay. In the 30th year of the 5th day of the 4th month, I was with the exiles at the Kebar River when the heavens opened and I saw visions of God. It happened on the 5th day of the month in the 5th year after King Jehoiakim's deportation. The Lord's word burst in on the priest Ezekiel, Buzi's son, in the land of Babylon at the Kebar River. There, the Lord's power overcame him. As I watched, Ezekiel says, suddenly a driving storm came out of the north, a great cloud of flashing fire with brightness all around. At its center, in the middle of the fire, there was something like gleaming amber. And inside that were forms of 4 living creatures. This is what they looked like. Each had the form of a human being, though each had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their feet looked like proper feet, but the soles of their feet were like calves' hooves, and they shone like burnished bronze. Human hands were under their wings on all 4 sides. All 4 creatures had faces and wings, and their wings touched each other's wings. When they moved, they each went straight ahead without turning. As for the form of their faces, each of the 4 had a human face, with a lion's face on the right, and a bull's face on the left, and also an eagle's face. The pair of wings that stretched out overhead touched each other, while the other pairs covered their bodies. Each moved straight ahead wherever the wind propelled them. They moved without turning. Regarding the creatures' forms, they looked like blazing coals, like torches. Fire darted about between the creatures and illuminated them, and lightning flashed from the fire. The creatures looked like lightning streaking back and forth. As I looked at the creatures, suddenly there was a wheel on the earth corresponding to all 4 of the creatures, all 4 faces of the creatures. The appearance and composition of the wheels were like sparkling topaz. There was one shape for all 4 of them, as if one wheel were inside another. When they moved in any of the 4 directions, they moved without swerving. Their rims were tall and terrifying. Is that not a great verse? Life verse, for those of you looking for a life verse. I can't help but think of Dre's Ain't Nothing But a G Thing when I read that verse. Maybe Ezekiel was thinking the same. Anyway, their rims were tall and terrifying because all 4 of them were filled with eyes all around. When the creatures moved, the wheels moved next to them. Whenever the creatures rose above the earth, the wheels also rose up. Wherever the wind would appear to go, the wind would make them go there too. The wheels rose up beside them because the spirit of the creatures was in the wheels. When they moved, the wheels moved. When they stood still, the wheels stood still, and when they rose above the earth, the wheels rose up along with them, because the spirit of the creatures was in the wheels. I mean, James Cameron has nothing on Ezekiel. The shape above the heads of the creatures was a dome. It was like glittering ice stretched out over their heads. Just below the dome, their outstretched wings touched each other. They each also had 2 wings to cover their bodies. Then I heard the sound of their wings when they moved forward. It was like the sound of mighty waters, like the sound of the Almighty, the sound of tumult, or the sound of an army camp. Y'all, I'm exhausted. When they stood still, their wings came to rest. Then there was a sound from above the dome over their heads. They stood still, and their wings came to rest. Above the dome over their heads, there appeared something like lapis lazuli in the form of a throne. Above the form of the throne, there was a form that looked like a human being. Above what looked like his waist, I saw something like gleaming amber, something like fire enclosing it all around. Below what looked like his waist, I saw something that appeared to be fire. Its brightness shone all around. Just as a rainbow lights up a cloud on a rainy day, so its brightness shone all around. This was how the form of the Lord's glory appeared. When I saw it, I fell on my face. I heard the sound of someone speaking. I don't even think I need to say anything, y'all, because it's pretty clear, isn't it? Yeah, this, kids, is why you shouldn't do drugs. Oh, that's funny. Cracking myself up this morning. This is how Ezekiel 1 begins. So, if you're like me, you read it and think, how? Like, A, how did this story survive? And B, it's 2020. What is there for us sophisticated moderns, right? We read of a man named Ezekiel whose father is boozy by a river somewhere, who has this vision, dream, sci-fi, 3D thing, and his response is that he falls face down. And then there are all of these fantastic over-the-top elements. There's wind, really ferocious wind. And then there's lightning, and then there are these creatures. And these creatures have 4 faces. They have a human face, and a face like an eagle, and a face like an ox, and then they have a face like a lion. All of this the important point to point out, all of this causes Ezekiel to fall face down and worship God. How does that work? So, as we've learned before, there's generally a story behind the story. And when you read something terribly bizarre, sort of strange like this, the first question to ask is, what is the other thing going on here? And everything we need to know is tucked away in verse 3. Let's read that again. It says, the Lord's word burst in on the priest Ezekiel. Now, a priest in the Hebrew scriptures worked in the temple, which was in Jerusalem. And there are endless artists' renderings of what the temple would have looked like. What we have to first understand is that in the Jewish Hebrew consciousness, spirituality was oriented around geography. So, for you and I, the question, where is God, would be answered very differently than a priest in the days of Ezekiel. Because in the Jewish consciousness of the scriptures, God had a geographical place where God was essentially more present, where God resided in a particular way, namely the temple in Jerusalem. So their sense of spirituality had also with it geography. That make sense? Where is God? God is in Jerusalem, dwelling specifically in the temple. And so when Ezekiel is identified as a priest, Ezekiel is somebody whose job is to run and organize and facilitate the work of the temple, which was to create a place where people could come from all over the world, offer sacrifices, and essentially make peace with and be connected in a particular way their God, the God of Israel. And there were very strict rules about how this was to be done. Think Book of Leviticus sort of stuff. Now, if you went to the temple one year, and then you went the next year, and you asked, are you still going to run the temple like you did last year? You probably wouldn't find the priest saying, we just thought we'd kind of, spice things up a bit. Maybe do something different. No. Does the priest do it just one year and then sort of make up something the next? Or does the priest do the same rituals and practices year after year after year? To be a priest, it's about repetition. It's about order. It's about symmetry. A priest is the ultimate company man. Are you with me? A priest is the ultimate company man. A priest has some TPS reports you can fill out, right? The priest says, you're going to need to do some paperwork on that one. So as we get into the psychology of Ezekiel, and we learn that he's a priest was somebody who did the same rituals week after week, year after year in the temple, creating a place where people could come. I mean, the world is chaotic. The world can be very dark. The world can be a very disorienting place. The world can be profoundly unsafe. I mean, 2020, right? But you come to the temple and there is order. There are the instructions, the rituals, and there is stability and consistency. This is who God is. This is what God is like. So first, we learn that Ezekiel is a priest. Now back to verse 3. I told you that this little verse holds the key to this chapter. The Lord's word burst in on the priest Ezekiel, Buzi's son. So, second, we find out in verse 3 that Ezekiel's father is this guy named Buzi. And Buzi, Ezekiel's father, was a priest as well. So this man, Ezekiel, is second generation temple. This man is a company man. There is a way things are to be done, repetition. And then notice the end of verse 3. The Lord's word burst in on the priest Ezekiel, Buzi's son, in the land of Babylon at the Kebar River. Now wait a second. Ezekiel is a priest. He's second generation priest, Buzi's son. He's supposed to be in Jerusalem at the temple. But verse 3 tells us he's sitting by a river in Babylon. Now, if you know anything about biblical history, you know that a foreign empire came in and conquered Jerusalem. King Nebuchadnezzar came into the temple and destroyed it, murdered, massacred. They destroyed the temple. Flattened it, murdered, and pillaged. And so when the book opens, before the crazy vision, and Ezekiel is by the Kabar, the river Kabar, the Kabar River is in Babylon. There's no temple left. And he, along with those who survived, have been essentially enslaved and hauled 700 miles across the desert to a foreign land. That's why the book begins by the river. The book opens and it kind of jumps around in time. Like, this is a man who's lost everything. Now, when he's extracted from the world that he knows, the world in which he's considered an authority, in which he's an established leader, where people come to him for wisdom, when he's lost his family, and he's lost his temple, and he's lost his vocation, and he's lost his homeland, it's not just that he gets extracted from everything that's familiar. He's in Babylon. Now, the main god of Babylon was the goddess Ishtar. And there was a massive Ishtar gate that when you were hauled into the city, especially as an exile, as somebody that Babylon had conquered, you would be brought in through the Ishtar gate as a way of saying, you're no longer home. You're in our house now. You're in Ishtar's house. In the 1930s, they dug up a portion of Ishtar's gate that these foreign slaves would have been dragged through. And the Berlin Museum has recreated what it would have been like. So you're dragged through this gate as a way of saying, symbolically, you're not in Kansas anymore. You're in Babylon. You are in the goddess Ishtar's house. Now, this is a company man. This man knows one God, his God, the God of his people Israel. His temple has been destroyed. Where is his God now? It's not just that he's in another place, but he's now in another God's place. Here's a little bit about Ishtar. She was considered the divine personification of Venus. She was the goddess of fertility, love, war, and sex. And so you see quotes, like here's one quote from the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is a quote from Ishtar. She comes to the doors of this mythic underworld and she says, "If you refuse to give me the bull of heaven, then I will break in the doors of hell and smash the bolts." This is like the heavy metal goddess, okay? She's like ready to rip it up. This is not a kind, loving God. This is Ishtar. And this is where Ezekiel finds himself. And it's here by the river that this broken man receives this unbelievably fantastic, vibrant, pulsating, creative, imaginative, sci-fi, over-the-top vision in which he realizes that God is present. And he falls down. And this man worships face down, not in the temple, but 700 miles away in Babylon. Do you see why this story has survived? Can you see why we need this story in the midst of this pandemic? A sort of exile of our own. Now, a couple of thoughts about Ezekiel and lessons for us during this strange time. What you see here in chapter 1 is that some things we can only learn in exile, or maybe quarantine for us. When Ezekiel was at the top of his game in the temple, with the elders coming to him for wisdom, doing his tasks with great skill and expertise, if you had said to Ezekiel, hey, you know what? The God of Israel is just as present in Babylon as God is present here. Ezekiel would say, come on, God's in Jerusalem. Our God dwells with us here. That's how it works. Like, our God's in Jerusalem. And if you were to say, no, God's also in Babylon. No. Babylon is Ishtar's house. Babylon's where Ishtar lives. Ezekiel would have argued with you, I assume. But he ends up in exile. And it's there by the river. God shows up in Babylon. Would Ezekiel have ever understood that until it happened? Some things you can only learn when everything falls apart. Now, here's why this is so profound. and I would argue has incredible implications for 2020. There is a tendency among religious people to localize their gods. Our God resides here, in our sanctuary, in our sacred spaces. To territorialize and to tame your God, to fit your God into your place, this God, we are terribly advanced, but there are also profound ways in which we are terribly primitive. No, God's here. We localize our gods. And what happens in the exile is God shows up in Ishtar's house. In blazing, radiant, luminous, explosive glory. And Ezekiel realizes, yes, I spent my whole life with God in the temple, but God apparently is just as much by the river in Babylon. This God cannot be localized. Wherever you go, there God is. Because this is the fear. This is like the fear, right? The haunting fear that the action is somewhere else. Think about the last 8 or so months. We've been scattered, exiled in some ways. Church is weird right now. And I think the haunting fear is that God is somewhere else. God is not in this living room. God is somewhere else. God is not in this hospital. God is not in this classroom. God is not behind this mask. The last place God is in this apartment complex. I'll tell you, the action, trust me, is somewhere else. God is over there, or somewhere, or Sunday morning, or in that sanctuary, or with those people, or in that. And if I was just there, then, are you with me? What we do is we localize our gods. And sometimes we localize gods in the places where we aren't. God is clearly over there. That haunting fear that the action is somewhere else. If anybody ever believed that, it would have been Ezekiel, who's ripped from Jerusalem. The temple's been destroyed, and he finds himself by the river. But it's there that God shows up with rims that are tall and terrifying. Yeah. This is blowing his entire worldview to pieces. Ezekiel, I can show up wherever I want, whenever I want. I am everywhere. Can you imagine for a good company man whose company has just been burned to the ground? A man who's done the repetition, the rituals. Can you imagine how this would have affected him? I would say this, for Ezekiel, God is that which is after the temple, after Jerusalem, after Israel, after the altar, after his religion. That's what happens in Ezekiel 1. Ezekiel meets the God who's hanging around after Ezekiel's religion has been blown into 1,000 pieces. God is that which can survive even your religion being burned to the ground. Are you with me now? He had his construct. He had his paradigm, and it gets blown into a million little smithereens. And on the other side of that, who does he meet? The God who is radiant and shines and is luminous and explodes with such beauty, and he falls face down. How does chapter 1 end? With a priest falling face down by the river in Babylon. Now, this isn't just about Ezekiel. I think this is a hidden, rare opportunity that the last 8 months, in all of their pain and difficulty, have given us. God is that which is after our words. God is that which is after our theology, after our doctrine, after your view of the Bible, after Christianity as you understand it. God can even survive that. Because what will happen, and I've seen this happen so many times, especially during the season, is that somebody was born, raised, taught, or picked up along the way a particular conception of God, Jesus, Bible, salvation, etc., and they encounter experiences and relationships in which that no longer works the way it used to. I think that's the reality many of us are experiencing right now. And so what immediately happens is, well, maybe there is no God. Maybe there is no hope. Maybe there is no truth. Maybe there is no grounding. Maybe there is no center of being. Maybe it's all just no. Whatever it is, whatever you're taking apart, whatever doesn't work like it used to. So you're deconstructing it, you're poking holes in it, and you're realizing pieces of it don't work anymore. Whatever that process is, when you find yourself on the other side, the one whose rims are tall and terrifying will be waiting for you. Are you with me? There is nothing to fear. There's nothing to be concerned about. There's nothing to tremble over. The divine is that which is left over after everything else has failed you. So we take great passion with our words. We love theology. We uphold doctrine. We obviously open the Bible, all at the same time knowing that if it were to burn to the ground, whatever that means, because that's what happened to Ezekiel. Like if, for example, hypothetical, we had, say, 8 months of disorientation and disconnection from our normal rituals and rhythms and practices, God will still be there holding us in loving embrace, meeting us in our hearts and speaking to us with wild imagination what we need to hear. One last thought. The invitation in exile. I might put it like this. The invitation in exile. This God, the one who Ezekiel encountered, doesn't need a religion, doesn't need an altar or a theological system or a statement of beliefs. This God shows up in such power and glory and overwhelming beauty that the only proper response for us is to say with Ezekiel, I saw it and I fell face down. And I heard the voice of one speaking. Come on now. Maybe we say it this way. Our invitation is to let the pain be our teacher. Ezekiel is in great pain. He is miles from home. His whole worldview has been shattered. His wife has died. He is 700 miles across the desert from anything familiar. He is in Ishtar's house, and it's there in the midst of extraordinary pain that he meets a God who is free from geography. And that God assures him, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. The pain of his exile becomes his teacher. Pain opens him up to all new realities about his God. Let's take a moment and pray, shall we? This morning, is there any pain you're experiencing during this season? Any exile, any confusion? Has anything been turned upside down? Has anything been lost? Has anything been burned to the ground? And often when this happens, our temptation is to try and figure out how to avoid it, how to get around it, how to just get through it, but the pain can be our teacher. We see with Ezekiel this man who goes from profound despair to worship. Let's pray. God, we meet you by the river. We meet you in the disorientation, in the dislocation. We meet you in the foreign land. We meet you after we have clung so tightly, when everything that we've clung so tightly to has disappeared, has left us, has walked out the door, has been burned to the ground, has fallen apart, no longer works for us. We meet you there. God, we ask you to use the pain to be our teacher, to show us, to open us up. We thank you this morning for the resurrected Christ who knows about pain, the Christ who meets us in our place of pain and anguish and does something new out of it. So we take this ancient, ecstatic, exuberant, hard to understand vision to a tired prophet by a river miles from home. We soak it up. We ask you to speak to us. For all the ways in which we worship the mind, in which we demand cognitive, intellectual reasons and explanations, we ask you to subvert our mind and speak directly to our heart. Healing, comfort. We thank you for the joyous announcement of the good news that You've taken our sin and failures, things that have been done to us. You take it all and you do something fresh with it. Thank you for this resurrected Christ who meets us in our pain, shows us, teaches us, and opens us up. And it's in the name of this Jesus that everybody said, amen. Friends, thanks so much for being with us this morning. We'll be back same time next week online on Facebook or YouTube. Just a reminder, like during this series on Monday evenings, we're having kind of follow-up conversations. Last week, following Julia's sermon, we met with Dr. Michael Raymer Goodman to talk about COVID-19 and the pandemic and the response of the church. This week, we'll be meeting with two amazing folks, Reverend Dr. Vincent Harris, who is our district superintendent and incredibly innovative, out-of-the-box sort of thinker, and my good friend Reverend Dr. Matt Russell, who many of you guys know, who has worked with Iconoclast and Project Curate and is doing some really cool things at Chapelwood in Houston. These guys, I think, are some of the most innovative folks we have in our conference, and so it's going to be a gift to think of them, to think through with them, like, as we sit by our own river, what is God calling us to as this pandemic hopefully will be coming to an end sometime soon? What does the church need to look like? What are the markers of whatever this new thing is? So I hope you'll come and be a part of that tomorrow night. We're going to kick it back over to Ezra, but hear these words of benediction, Central. As you find yourself sitting by the river in your own Babylon during this time of pandemic, may you not find yourself in despair or disorientation. May instead you find yourself open to the God who shows up even in that place, this God whose rims are tall and terrifying. And may in that space you be met with a new vision of what could be. That the God that we love and we serve isn't bound up in our human constructions and conceptions, but transcends all of that and meets us even after those things fail us. All that really means around here, Central, is go and be central. I love you guys. We'll see you next week.
You make beautiful things. You